My wife was in the kitchen preparing a candlelit dinner for me when my phone lit up at the worst possible moment. On the screen, next to the profile picture of her male best friend, were 3 words, "Thinking of you." My blood ran cold. I picked up the phone and calmly typed a reply. "Come over." He just left. Send. Power off. All in one smooth motion. Then I called my father-in-law, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "Dad, you need to get here fast. Something's about to happen to her." Half an hour later, the doorbell rang in a series of frantic jabs. I opened it. Outside stood my father and mother-in-law, their faces etched with panic, a crowd of relatives who had clearly been summoned trailing behind them. And at the other end of the hallway, that same best friend was walking toward us, holding a bouquet of flowers, his face lit with anticipation. 01 I pulled the door open. The cold, white light of the hallway sliced the world into 2 distinct realities, the one inside my home and the one outside. Outside, my father-in-law, Richard Davis, and my mother-in-law, Carol, were a portrait of anxiety and impatience. Behind them, a whole clan of relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins, had gathered, their expressions a mix of curiosity, speculation, and thinly veiled schadenfreude, as their eyes darted all over my face. "Ryan, what the hell is this?" Richard's voice was a low rumble, carrying the oppressive weight of a man used to being in charge. "What could possibly happen to Chloe? You making a scene? Are you trying to embarrass us?" My gaze traveled past them, down the other end of the hall. The other man, Trevor Vance, the one Chloe described as closer than a brother, was strolling breezily in our direction, clutching a massive bouquet of gaudy red roses. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his hair slicked back with too much product, his face beaming with an irrepressible, almost giddy anticipation. Clearly, he thought he was walking into a romantic tryst. The moment his eyes met the grim-faced crowd packed into our doorway, the anticipation on his face froze, then shattered into a million pieces of unconcealable shock and embarrassment. The roses in his hand suddenly looked like a pathetic joke. I stepped aside, ignoring my father-in-law's bellowing. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone present to hear. "Everyone, please come in." I paused, letting the implication land. Let's not air our dirty laundry in the hallway. Those last few words, delivered with icy calm, were like a boulder dropped into a stagnant pond, sending shockwaves through the crowd. The relatives began whispering to each other, the murmur growing into a low buzz as their gazes swung between me, my father-in-law, and the petrified Trevor. Like a cold, emotionless usher, I guided this audience of gossips into the home I had paid for with my dignity and sweat, but had never truly been allowed to call my own. The crystal chandelier in the living room glittered. On the dining table, an elegant tablecloth was set, 2 red candles burning quietly, their wax already starting to drip. The air was thick with the scent of seared steak and the rich aroma of Cabernet. My wife, Chloe, emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 perfectly plated New York strips, humming a cheerful tune. "Honey, you have to try this. I think I finally mastered." Her voice died in her throat as she took in a room full of somber faces. The smile froze on her lips, her beautiful eyes widening in disbelief. "Dad? Mom? What are you all doing here?" Her gaze finally landed on Trevor, who was hovering awkwardly by the door with his bouquet. The disbelief curdled into panic. "Trevor, you—" I didn't give her the chance to question me. I walked steadily to the dining table, and with every eye in the room fixed on me, I picked up Chloe's iPhone. Face ID unlocked it. The screen lit up. Without saying a single word, I shoved the phone directly in front of Richard Davis's face. On the screen, in a text thread with a contact saved simply as Trevor, the last message glowed with damning clarity. "Thinking of you." Richard's pupils contracted. His face, for a split second, was a mask of shock, but he was a man who had weathered storms before. The shock lasted only a moment. He snapped his head up, his eyes bypassing his daughter and fixing all their fury on me. "It's a text message." His roar echoed through the living room. "You're going to tear this family apart over one stupid text message? Ryan, do you have any sense of proportion? Any backbone at all?" My mother-in-law, Carol, chimed in immediately, her shrill voice a perfect harmony. Exactly. Chloe and Trevor have been attached at the hip since they were kids. They're practically siblings. What's wrong with a little joke between friends? Her contemptuous glare raked across my face like a razor. You married up, Ryan, but you're still so insecure. Your jealousy is pathetic. I don't know what Chloe ever saw in you. I listened to the familiar, cutting words that had been thrown at me for 3 years. Every single time, I had chosen to endure it to back down. Not today. A cold laugh rumbled in my chest. I scanned the room, my eyes moving slowly from my furious father-in-law to my sharp-tongued mother-in-law to my panicking wife, and finally, landing squarely on the man holding the bouquet of awkward roses. Oh, a joke. I enunciated each word with chilling precision. Why don't we ask the man himself just how he intended to deliver the punchline? In an instant, every eye in the room swiveled away from me and onto Trevor's pale, sweating face. The red roses in his hand might, as well, have been a lit torch, searing the eyes of everyone present. 02, Chloe finally snapped out her stupor. But her reaction wasn't guilt or a desire to explain. It was the raw, cornered fury of being caught. She lunged at me like an enraged lioness and snatched the phone from my hand. Her eyes were instantly bloodshot, not with tears of remorse, but with flames of anger. Ryan, how dare you go through my phone? She shrieked, her voice hoarse with emotion. We've been married for 3 years. Don't you have even a basic level of trust in me? This is a complete violation of my privacy. I watched her, this face I had loved for so long, now twisted into an ugly, unfamiliar mask. Tell me, Chloe, I asked calmly, should I trust you? She was momentarily speechless, but quickly found a new angle of attack. Trust is one thing, but spying on me is another. You were wrong to look at my phone, and then you call my parents? You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone? You're a despicable coward, Ryan. That's enough. Richard Davis slammed his hand on the table, the sharp crack silencing Chloe's tirade. He pointed a trembling finger at my face. Let me tell you something, Ryan. The Davis family owes you nothing. You live in my house. You drive my car. It was my daughter who gave a broke kid from nowhere a respectable life in this city. And now you've got the nerve to get a big head and start pointing fingers at her. His words were like a bucket of sludge dumped over my head. The relatives who had been on the fence now knew which side to take. It's true. He married into the family, but you can't take the small town out of the boy. Chloe must have been out of her mind to choose him. He lives off their money, uses their things, and shows zero gratitude. What an ungrateful bastard. I bet he's just insecure. He's got nothing himself, so he's terrified of losing his wife to someone better. The whispers grew into a public verdict. Every word was a dull knife, twisting in my heart. For 3 years, I had lived like a ghost in this family, devoid of dignity, devoid of self. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was compliant enough, I could earn their respect. I was wrong. In their eyes, I would always be the broke kid who needed their charity. Just then, Trevor, who had been silent this whole time, finally made his move. He surreptitiously placed the offending bouquet on a shoe rack by the door and stepped forward, plastering a look of sickeningly sincere concern on his face. Ryan, man, you've got this all wrong, he said, his tone oozing with a placating, reasonable kindness. Chloe and I are best friends. We go back more than a decade. I knew it was your anniversary, so I just wanted to surprise her, you know? Give her a laugh. The thinking of you text was just a joke between us. You can't take that seriously. He delivered his lines with Emmy-worthy conviction, then turned to Chloe, his voice softening into a gentle caress. Chloe, don't cry. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have joked like that. I'm so sorry I caused a fight between you two. His words were the catalyst. Chloe's tears, held at bay by anger, now streamed down her face. It wasn't the anguish of being wrongly accused. It was the righteous indignation of having found her excuse. She was now the world's most innocent victim. She pointed a trembling finger at me and screamed with all her might. Are you happy now, Ryan? You brought everyone here to laugh at me, to point their fingers at me. You just wanted to destroy me. Get out. Get out of this house. Get out. Her hysterical shrieks filled the living room. They all expected me to either crumble in shame and apologize, or explode in rage and be thrown out. But I didn't either. I didn't move. Instead, I slowly pulled out a chair from the dining table, and, under the stunned gaze of everyone present, I sat down. The candlelight flickered in front of me, casting shifting shadows across my face. I looked around at each of them, the furious, the condescending, the entertained. Since everyone is here today, my voice was terrifyingly calm. There are a few things we should get straight, once and for all. My composure was a bucket of ice water on their bonfire of outrage. They all just stared, dumbfounded. I had ripped their script to shreds. The meek, compliant son-in-law was refusing to play his part. Carol was the first to recover. She planted her hands on her hips, puffing up like a belligerent hen. She jabbed a finger in my direction, her voice dripping with venom. Get straight? What do you have to say? Our Chloe marrying you was the charity case of the century. The Davis family turned you from a nobody into a somebody, and now you have the gall to turn on us. You ungrateful, freeloading bastard. Charity case? I repeated the words, a bitter, metallic taste flooding my mouth. I looked at my mother-in-law's face, contorted with rage, then let my gaze drift to my father-in-law, Richard Davis. Richard, for the past 3 years, I quit my own promising job in architecture to come work as a project manager at your company. You said we were family, that we shouldn't worry about the details. You said you'd hold onto my salary for me, that would all be ours someday. I believed you. So for 3 years, I haven't taken a single paycheck from Davis Construction. I paused, giving him and the rapt audience of relatives time to process that. A low murmur rippled through the room. Ignoring it, I turned to my mother-in-law, Carol. Carol, the freelance design work I did on the side brought in an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You said young people are irresponsible with money and can't save. You told me to transfer it all to you, that you'd invest it for us for the good of our little family. I believe you too. So every single month, every last cent of my earnings went directly into your bank account. The room grew even quieter. I could hear a few sharp intakes of breath from the relatives. Finally, my eyes landed on my wife, Chloe. Her face had gone pale, and she refused to meet my gaze. Chloe, before we got married, I took every penny I'd saved from years of working, plus my parents' entire life savings, and I made a down payment on a small 2-bedroom condo out in Aurora. You said you felt insecure because your name wasn't on the deed. Richard also chimed in, saying we were all family now, and that adding your name to the title was the right thing to do to make you feel secure. Then, a little later, you both said it would be better for our future kids' schooling if we sold my condo, invested the money in Richard's company, and lived here in this luxury Cherry Creek condo. And after that, Richard said the company needed assets for a collateral loan. You've both convinced me to sign the deed of my premarital condo over to you entirely, saying it would simplify the process. I hesitated, but you said, we're married, what's mine is yours. And like a fool, I did it. That condo, that was my parents' retirement fund. It was the only thing that was truly mine. My voice trembled slightly as I said it, not from fear, but from a deep, aching pain. Chloe's lips quivered. She couldn't form a single word. The relatives' whispers were no longer whispers. They were audible gasps of shock. What? Ryan owned his own place, and it tricked him into signing it over to Chloe? That's ruthless. No salary for 3 years, and they took all his side money too? Did they want a son-in-law or an indentured servant? The tide was turning swiftly and silently. I straightened my back, feeling like a volcano that had been dormant for 3 years, finally ready to erupt. I gave up my career, my money, my only property, and all of my dignity. I looked at the 3 of them and asked, my voice low and dangerous, and what did I get in return? An anniversary evening with a casual, just joking text message from another man? Or did I get your entire family pointing their fingers at me, calling me petty, calling me an ungrateful bastard, and telling me to get out? My questions were like knives, finding their mark in the family's hollow heart of hypocrisy. Richard Davis's face went from red to a deep, blotchy purple. He was cornered, speechless, his authority and composure gone. In a fit of pure, desperate rage, he blurted out the one thing he should have kept buried. So what if we did? Without the Davis family. Who the hell are you? Ryan Mitchell. Don't you forget where you came from. If we hadn't used you to set up that subsidiary, if we didn't need a Colorado native to meet the residency requirements, how do you think we would have ever gotten that city contract approved? Do you think my daughter would have looked twice at you if we didn't need you to secure that protected municipal project? Do you think you were ever good enough for her? The words hung in the air, and the world fell silent. Richard himself froze, realizing what he'd just admitted. A flash of panic crossed his face, but it was too late. I laughed. It was a hollow, desolate sound that came from the depths of my soul. So that was it. From the very beginning, from the sham of our first date, from Chloe's first little lie about my dad being a farm manager instead of a farmer, it had all been a complete and utter fraud. They never wanted me, Ryan Mitchell. They wanted my residency status. They wanted my identity as a local to pry open the door to a lucrative city contract, gilded with protections and massive profits. All this time, I was nothing but a tool, a carefully selected, disposable tool. I slowly stood up, my gaze locking onto Chloe's face, which was now as white as a sheet. So, now that the contract is secured and the project is almost finished, I've outlived my usefulness. Is that it? So it's time for your best friend Trevor to make his entrance, to stage a little cheating drama, to push my buttons, make me lash out, and give you the perfect excuse to kick me to the curb with nothing. My voice was quiet, but every word landed like a hammer blow. The room was dead silent. Every single relative understood. The way they looked at me changed from scorn to pity, and then to horror. And the way they looked at the Davis family was now filled with disbelief and contempt. This was no longer a simple domestic dispute. This was a premeditated conspiracy. This was fraud. You're lying. Richard stammered, his bravado crumbling. The tremor in his voice and his darting eyes betrayed his panic. I never said any of that. You're making things up. I ignored his pathetic theatrics. I simply reached into my pocket and took out my own phone. Then, as everyone watched, I hit play. A crystal-clear audio recording filled the silent living room. First, Richard Davis's familiar, oily voice. Trevor, the first payment for the municipal project is about to clear. In the meantime, I need you to spend more time with Chloe. Take her out, go shopping, see a movie. Ryan's been on edge lately, getting harder to control. You need to push his buttons. You know how it is with men and jealousy. Then, Trevor's obsequious, disgusting reply. Don't you worry, Mr. Davis. Leave it to me. A few dates alone with Chloe, some flirtatious texts. With Ryan's insecurity and inferiority complex, he's guaranteed to explode. The second he causes a scene, Chloe will have all the reason she needs to file for divorce. He'll be the one at fault, and he'll have to walk away with nothing. In the recording, Richard grunted in satisfaction, his voice dripping with smug triumph. You always see the big picture. Chloe's a sweet girl, but she's naive, easily influenced. She needs someone to look out for her. A broke kid like Ryan with no connections. He was always just a stepping stone. Once he served his purpose, you throw him away. After we get rid of him, our two companies can merge. That's a real power move. I'll rest easy knowing Chloe is with you. The recording ended. You could have heard a pin drop. If my accusations had merely torn a hole in their facade, the recording was a bomb that obliterated it completely, exposing the ugly, rotten core of the Davis family. The blood drained from Trevor's face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He shot a look at Richard filled with the horror and rage of a co-conspirator who'd just been publicly betrayed. And Chloe, my wife, turned stiffly, inch by inch, to face her father, looking like a statue carved from ice. Her voice was as faint as a whisper, yet it carried the weight of utter devastation. Dad, is this real? You were using me? This whole time? Richard's lips had turned a bluish purple. He pointed at me, his fingers shaking like a leaf in a storm. You set me up. Ryan, you son of a bitch. When did you record that? I slowly put my phone back in my pocket. I looked at the completely broken Chloe, the terrified Richard, and the humiliated Trevor, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I spoke calmly, like a judge delivering a final verdict. Now, let's talk about whose fault this really is. I had directed this entire play, and the only people I'd given tickets to were the Davis family and their closest relatives. I wanted them to be stripped bare, publicly humiliated in front of the very people whose opinions they cared about most. I had recorded that conversation 2 weeks ago, Richard had sent me on a pointless errand to discuss project details while he met with Trevor in his office. He thought I was gone. He didn't know that the burner phone I'd left charging on his desk was in recording mode. 3 years of suppression, of sensing that something was deeply wrong, had forced me to create an insurance policy. I knew the day they would discard me was coming. I was just waiting for the perfect moment. Today, Chloe's phone gave me that moment. 05 with the evidence laid bare. There was no room left for denial. The same relatives who had been sneering at me moments ago were now frozen in stunned silence. After the initial shock wore off, the tide of public opinion turned violently against the Davis family. A cousin who had some business rivalry with Richard cleared his throat, his face a mask of grave disappointment. Richard, this is low, even for you. Using your own daughter as a pawn in a business deal? If this gets out, who's ever going to trust you again? That opened the floodgates. Exactly. Ryan has been nothing but a model son-in-law for 3 years. Hardworking, respectful, capable. How could you people treat him like this? An aunt declared, slapping her thigh in righteous indignation. This is unbelievable. Using him for his residency and then plotting to throw him out like trash? That's just evil. I always said Chloe was getting too close to that Trevor kid, that it wasn't right. You all told me I was being nosy. Look now, he wasn't a best friend. He was a homewrecker you hired. The same aunt who had been loudest in her support for them now adopted a tone of stern condemnation. Richard, Carol, you two have gone too far this time. You've brought shame on the entire Davis name. When it rains, it pours. The same people who had scorned me now spat on Richard. This wasn't just about moral judgment. It was about realigning their own interests. Who would want to be associated with a man who would manipulate his own daughter and son-in-law for profit? Carol tried to regain control with her usual tactic, throwing a tantrum. This is a private family matter. It's none of your business. All of you get out. But this time no one was buying it. A distant cousin, who had borrowed money from them, seized his opportunity. What do you mean it's not our business? He boomed. Carol, you borrowed $20,000 from me last year for company cash flow, and you still haven't paid it back. Seeing as you're so good at scheming people out of their assets, maybe it's time you paid your debts. Yeah, and what about my 10 grand? My 5. Suddenly, the lavish living room turned into a chaotic debt collection agency. At the center of the storm, Chloe finally broke free from the numb shock of her double betrayal. She threw herself at her father, a wounded animal, her cries tearing through the room. Why? Dad, tell me why. I'm your daughter. How could you conspire with an outsider to ruin my marriage, to ruin my life? She sobbed hysterically, then whirled on the ashen-faced Trevor. And you, Trevor, you told me you loved me. You said you would always be there for me. Is this how you love me? By plotting with my father to deceive me? By treating me like a prize in your business merger? Get out. Both of you, just get out. Trevor was speechless, his mouth opening and closing as he stammered out a few pathetic words. Chloe, I was doing it for our future. Our future? I'd rather be homeless than have a future with a liar like you. Chloe screamed, grabbing oranges and apples from the fruit bowl and hurling them at him. They bounced off the expensive carpet, rolling in every direction. I watched the melodrama unfold, a scene more dramatic than any movie. I watched the once mighty Davis family, who had lorded their superiority over me, now abandoned and reviled by their own kin, turning on each other in their desperation. I felt no pity, only a grim, cold satisfaction. This was their just deserts. This was the feast I had prepared for them, with 3 years of pain and patience. Amid the chaos, I walked over to Chloe. She was slumped on the floor, her hair a mess, her makeup streaked with tears, looking like a broken doll. From the briefcase I brought with me, I pulled out a document I had prepared long ago. The divorce papers. I placed them gently on the coffee table in front of her. Sign it. My voice was devoid of all emotion, as cold and hard as stone. The crying and shouting stopped instantly. All eyes snapped back to me. Richard, looking like a cornered animal, shot up from his seat. You want a divorce? Fine, but you walk away with nothing, he roared, grasping at his last straw. I laughed, looking at him as if he were a court jester. Richard, I don't think you've grasped the situation yet. I held up one finger. First, my premarital condo, the one you tricked me into signing over to Chloe. The deed needs to be transferred back into my name, and my name alone. That was my parents' life savings. You don't deserve to touch it. I held up a second finger. Second, for 3 years, I worked as your project manager. I am owed my salary, bonuses, and my share of the profits from that municipal project. I've done the math. At market rate, it comes to $120,000. That amount will be transferred to my account, down to the last cent. Finally, I held up a third finger, my gaze turning sharp as a knife. Third, emotional damages. For your conspiracy, your deceit, for using me as a tool and causing me immense psychological distress. For that, you will pay me $50,000. The moment I finished, Richard began to tremble with rage, the muscles in his face twitching. In your dreams, Ryan, I'm not giving you a dime. We can go to court. We'll let the lawyers sort it out. Court, I said, as if it were the funniest thing I'd ever heard. Great. I'll be sure to submit this audio recording, along with every bank transfer and text message between us, as evidence. We'll let a judge decide what happens to a CEO who engages in marriage fraud, asset stripping, and conspiracy. I'm sure the press will find it fascinating. He was choked with fury. I nodded, as if I understood his pathetic struggle. Then, I calmly reached back into my briefcase, pulled out another, much thicker file, and tossed it onto the table. All right, I almost forgot about this. The file slid open, revealing the title on the top page. Davis Construction and Development. Internal accounts, copy. Below were damning procurement contracts and transfer records, showing payments flowing from shell corporations directly into a few personal accounts. I looked at Richard's eyes, which were now wide with pure terror, and delivered the final blow with a slight smile. These are copies of your 2 sets of books for the last 3 years, and some interesting invoices related to that municipal project. So, Richard, tell me, what's more important? A couple $100,000, or your company, and your freedom for the next decade or so? I have a feeling the IRS and the district attorney's office would be very interested in this. A whoosh of air escaped Richard's lungs. As if his bones had turned to jelly, he collapsed back onto the sofa. His eyes were vacant, his face the color of ash. I knew then. I had won. Absolutely and completely. Chloe stared at her father, who looked as though he had aged 20 years in 20 seconds, then at the damning financial records on the table. She finally understood. I hadn't come here tonight to argue or to plead my case. I had come for a reckoning, and I had brought the weapons to burn their entire world to the ground. The anger and resentment in her eyes were replaced by a profound, all-consuming fear. She scrambled over to me on her hands and knees and grabbed the cuff of my pants, her tear-streaked face tilted up to mine. Ryan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this. Don't do this to my dad. Her voice was a desperate, terrified plea. He's getting older. He can't handle this. If you turn this in, he's finished. Our family will be finished. I looked down at her, my heart a frozen stone. The years of humiliation, the pain I'd swallowed, the dignity they had trampled on, it had all solidified into a wall of ice. Ryan, I love you, she cried, playing her last emotional card. My feelings for you were real. I was weak. My parents were always in my ear, telling me you weren't good enough, that you were just after our money. She choked on her sobs. They said someone from your background could never really fit in, and I listened to them so much that I started to believe them. I let them blind me. Please, just give me one more chance, she begged, her eyes shimmering with tears. We can start over. I swear, I'll never listen to them again. We can leave this city, just the two of us. Please. It was a passionate, heart-wrenching performance. If she had said this yesterday, perhaps her tears might have moved me. I might have weakened. But now all I felt was the bitter sting of irony. I looked at her, as if she were a complete stranger. Chloe, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. You don't love me. You love the idea of a husband who would do anything you said, who would bow and scrape before your parents, who would let you and your family walk all over him without ever fighting back. You love having someone to provide you with emotional support, to dote on you and take care of you, while you could still secretly look down on him. The moment that version of me ceased to exist, so did your love. I watched her confused, wounded expression and continued. It's too late. The moment you stood in that kitchen, preparing a candlelit dinner while secretly planning my downfall, it was too late. The moment you discovered the truth, and your first reaction wasn't shame, but outrage that I had violated your privacy, it was too late. The moment you chose to stand with them and tell me to get out of your house, it was over. Her pleas weren't a sign of remorse. They were the terrified screams of a pampered princess who was about to lose her castle and all her servants. Gently, but firmly, I pulled my pant leg from her grasp. I picked up a pen from the table and held it out to her. Sign the papers. It's the only thing you can do for your brilliant, calculating father now. 08 Desperation makes beasts of men. Just as Chloe's trembling hand reached for the pen, Richard, who had been slumped on the sofa in defeat, suddenly sprang to life like a cornered animal. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a mask of primal fury as he lunged at me. "I'll kill you. Give me that evidence." His target was the briefcase, where he assumed the original documents were. The room erupted in screams. But I was ready. From the moment I decided on this confrontation, I had planned for every possibility, including the worst. As he charged, I didn't retreat. I took a calm, deliberate step to the side and stuck out my leg. Richard, propelled by the full force of his rage, met only empty air. My foot caught his ankle, and he lost his balance completely, slamming hard into the corner of the heavy mahogany dining table. A sickening thud echoed through the room, followed by his pained groan. He crumpled to the floor, clutching his ribs, unable to get up. I looked down at him coldly, as if he were a wild boar that had foolishly run into its own trap. "You want to get physical, Richard? Because I can call the police right now. Assault on top of conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. That should be enough to put you away for a very long time." My words froze the few relatives who had started to move forward to intervene. They looked terrified. The evening's entertainment had just escalated from a family drama to a potential felony. Several of the braver ones rushed to hold Richard down as he struggled on the floor. "Richard, calm down. Don't be stupid." Seeing her husband defeated and her world imploding, Carol's last thread of sanity snapped. She collapsed onto the cold floor and deployed her final, most practiced weapon, hysterics. She slapped her thighs and began to wail, her shrieks sharp enough to pierce eardrums. "Oh God, what did we ever do to deserve this? We took in an ungrateful snake. He ate our food, he lived in our house, and now he's trying to destroy us. My life is ruined. There's no justice in this world." I watched the ugly, pathetic display with nothing but contempt. I turned to the relatives, still restraining Richard. "Uncles, aunts, our family business is concluded," I said calmly. "What's left is a private matter between myself and Mr. Richard Davis. The show is over. You can all go home now." My words were pardoned. Looking relieved, they scrambled for the door, tripping over each other with flimsy excuses. "Oh dear, I left the soup on the stove. I have to go pick up my grandson." "Richard, you two talk it out, okay? Just talk it out." In a matter of seconds, the once crowded living room was empty. In the vast, silent space, only the three of us remained, a family in name only. Oh, and Trevor. He was still slumped in a chair in the corner, forgotten by everyone, a ghost at his own funeral. 09 in the face of absolute leverage. All resistance is futile. Richard was helped back to the sofa. He clutched his aching side, gasping for breath like a landed fish. His eyes, which had always held a look of dismissive appraisal, were now filled with nothing but fear and hatred. He knew he had lost, utterly, with no chance of comeback. "I'll pay," he rasped, each word forced from between clenched teeth. "Everything you asked for, I'll give it to you." It was the sound of his final surrender. I felt no joy, only the cold satisfaction of a debt being paid. I pushed the divorce papers and the pen back in front of Chloe. "Sign." My voice remained like iron. Chloe's body was racked with tremors. She looked up at me, her eyes a storm of emotions I'd never seen before: despair, regret, and a pleading sorrow. Silent tears streamed down her face, falling onto the divorce papers and blurring the ink. She picked up the pen, which seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds in her hand. Shaking, she signed her name on the line next to spouse 2. The two words were crooked and mangled, a perfect reflection of her shattered world. With the papers signed, It was time for the money. Richard didn't try any more tricks. In front of me, he called his company's CFO and, in a voice heavy with exhaustion and humiliation, ordered the immediate transfer of $170,000 to my account. I stood by and waited. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated. A text from my bank confirmed the deposit. The salary, the damages, it was all there. I tossed the thick file of copied financial documents onto the table in front of him. He snatched it like a drowning man grabbing a life raft. "Where are the originals?" he demanded, a flicker of cunning in his eyes. I smiled, a cold, sharp expression he couldn't misinterpret. "Don't worry," I said, my voice a clear warning. "Once the deed to the condo is transferred, and once the final bonus payment from the project is cleared, they will disappear. Until then, let's just say I'm keeping them in a safe place for you." It was my final insurance policy, a sword hanging over his head. I was making it clear that I could ruin him at any moment if he tried to double-cross me. Richard stared at me, the hatred in his eyes so potent it was almost tangible. But he was powerless. He could only watch his eye, the son-in-law he had never respected, ground his pride and his schemes into dust. With the deal done, it was time for me to leave. I walked back to the bedroom I had slept in for 3 years, but had never felt was mine. I didn't have much. A few changes of clothes, some architecture books, a laptop. I didn't even open the closet. It was filled with expensive, ill-fitting clothes Chloe had bought to make me look the part, none of which had ever felt like me. I only packed what I had brought into this marriage. My entire 3-year life here fit into a single suitcase. I walked out, dragging the suitcase behind me, without a word of goodbye. The living room was a wreck, the aftermath of a storm. Richard and Carol sat on the sofa like soulless statues. Chloe was still on the floor, staring blankly into space. Trevor had vanished at some point, slinking away unnoticed. I walked toward the door, step by step. Each footfall felt light, a physical manifestation of my unburdening. Just as my hand touched the doorknob, Chloe's urgent, tear-choked voice came from behind me. "Ryan." She had scrambled to her feet and grabbed my wrist. Her hand was cold and trembling. Is this really it?" I stopped but didn't turn around. I could feel her desperate gaze on my back. "Yes." One word. Simple. Final. No room for negotiation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking into a sob. "I'm so sorry." Her apology may have even been sincere, but it was too late. I no longer needed it. I took a deep breath. For the first time, the expensive aromatherapy diffuser in the room smelled like freedom. My voice was as calm as a deep lake. "Don't be sorry. In fact, I should probably thank you." She froze. "Thank you and your family for teaching me the most valuable lesson of my life," I continued. "You taught me that a relationship without equality will never earn your respect. You taught me that compromising your dignity only leads to a deeper abyss. And you taught me that, in the end, the only person you can ever truly rely on is yourself." With that, I firmly but gently pulled my arm from her grasp. I didn't look back. I walked straight into the elevator. The stainless steel doors began to slide shut, like a curtain falling on the final act of a play. In the reflection of the closing doors, I saw her collapse to the floor, a desolate, broken figure. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not sadness. Just relief. A profound, soul-deep relief. 11 after leaving that gilded cage, I checked into a hotel. The next month was a blur of efficiency. I finalized the transfer of the condo's deed. I went to the company offices and collected the last of my project bonuses. Richard didn't cause any trouble. He was terrified of me now. He looked at me like I was the devil himself. Once I had everything that was mine, I blocked all their numbers. I immediately rented a small office space downtown and registered my own architectural design studio. I was going back to my roots, back to the profession I had loved and fought for, the one I had given up for a lie. A month later, I heard news about the Davis family through a mutual acquaintance. Without my technical oversight, the municipal project had run into several major problems. The work was delayed, and the city had hit them with substantial penalties. Trevor's family's company, seeing an opportunity, had tried to lowball a partnership offer, which Richard saw as a vulture circling a dying animal. The two families had a nasty, public falling out, and the merger was off. Between the penalties and the failed partnership, Davis Construction's cash flow dried up. Richard was desperately trying to secure loans, but the story of what happened at the condo that night had spread like wildfire through their social and business circles. A man who would use his own daughter and defraud his son-in-law was poisoned. No one would touch him. Chloe, the once glamorous princess, had reportedly sold all her designer bags and jewelry to try and patch the holes in the family's finances, but it was a drop in the ocean. She had called and texted me dozens of times. I never answered, never replied. As for Trevor, the brilliant best friend, the fiasco had made him the biggest joke in town. The story of the failed seduction and public humiliation followed him everywhere. Several women he'd been set up with had canceled on him after hearing about his glorious deeds. One quiet evening, I packaged the original financial documents and mailed them, anonymously, to one of Richard's biggest business rivals. I no longer needed them as leverage, but evidence like that deserved to see the light of day. With the money I got back, plus my own savings, I poured everything into my studio. I was no longer an accessory, no longer a tool. Ryan Mitchell, was alive again. A few months later, I heard the Davis family had been forced to sell the luxury condo in Cherry Creek. They moved back to a rundown old house in the suburbs. From the penthouse to the gutter. 1 year later, my one-man studio had grown into a small team of 10. We had made a name for ourselves with a few innovative designs and had landed several major contracts. I bought my own place in a quiet green neighborhood downtown. It wasn't huge, but it was warm and comfortable. No crystal chandeliers, no cold mahogany furniture. Every single item was something I had chosen myself. Every square inch of the space felt like mine, filled with a quiet, hard-won freedom. On the 1-year anniversary of my studio's opening, I didn't make any plans. I opened a good bottle of wine, seared a perfect ribeye, and even lit a scented candle. Not to commemorate a disastrous dinner, but to celebrate a rebirth. My own. The warm candlelight danced in my wine glass, reflecting in my calm expression. My phone screen lit up. I picked it up. It was a message from a new, promising business associate. She was a sharp, no-nonsense project director for a major real estate developer. We met on a project bid and clicked instantly, our working styles perfectly in sync. The message was simple. Great meeting today, Ryan. Looking forward to the next one. It was followed by a professional but friendly, smiley face emoji. I looked at the message and smiled. A genuine, relaxed, and confident smile. I picked up the phone and typed back, "You too. Talk soon." There was no suspicion, no anxiety, none of the pointless emotional drain of the past. Just the certainty of a productive partnership and the confidence that comes from standing on equal ground. I took my wine glass and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city lights sparkled, a river of traffic flowing through the night. I raised my glass to the skyline, a toast to the man I used to be, the one who had suffocated and died in that house, and a toast to the man I was today, the one who had risen from the ashes. I knew, for Ryan Mitchell, the Real story was just beginning.